So today we're talking about something that's been shaking up the golf world in a way that, honestly, nobody saw coming. I mean, if you told me a few years ago that some of the biggest names in golf would just up and leave the PGA Tour for something completely different, I would have said you were crazy. But here we are. LIV Golf. You've probably heard the name thrown around, maybe seen some drama on social media. But what is it really? And why are players who've spent their entire careers on the PGA Tour suddenly jumping ship? This story is wild, and it's not just about golf, it's about money, politics, and what happens when an entire sport gets turned upside down. So first things first, what exactly is LIV Golf? Now, if you're thinking it's just another golf tour, you're kind of right, but also not really. LIV Golf is basically this new professional golf league that launched in 2022, and when I say it came out swinging, I mean it really came out swinging. The whole thing is backed by Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, and we're talking serious money here, like the kind of money that makes you do a double take when you see the numbers. We're not talking about your typical tournament prize pools. This is money that changes lives, changes careers, changes everything. The format is totally different too. Instead of the traditional 4-day tournaments that golfers have been playing forever, LIV does 3 days. Instead of individual competition only, they've got this team element where players are part of these franchises. It's like they took golf and said, you know what? Let's make this more like other sports. And the name, LIV, comes from the Roman numeral for 54, which is how many holes they play in their tournaments. See what they did there? Pretty clever if you think about it. But here's where things get really interesting. The money. Oh my goodness, the money. When LIV Golf started recruiting players, they weren't just offering prize money. They were offering what they called signing bonuses, but these weren't your typical bonuses. We're talking about guaranteed money that would set up a player's great-grandchildren for life. Phil Mickelson, one of the biggest names in golf, reportedly got somewhere around $200 million just to join. $200 million. That's not prize money he had to win. That's just for showing up and being part of LIV Golf. Dustin Johnson got something similar. Can you imagine getting a phone call and someone saying, hey, we'll give you $200 million to play golf for us? Now you might be thinking, well, these guys were already making tons of money on the PGA Tour. And you're right, they were doing pretty well. But here's the thing, even the top golfers on the PGA Tour might make, let's say, 10 to 15 million in a really good year. That includes prize money, endorsements, everything. LIV was offering more than that just as a signing bonus before they even played a single hole. It's like if you were making a good salary at your job and then someone came along and offered you 10 times that amount, guaranteed, just to switch companies. What would you do? I mean, really, what would you do? So naturally, the PGA Tour wasn't just going to sit there and watch their biggest stars walk away. The response was swift and it was harsh. Any player who joined LIV Golf was immediately suspended from PGA Tour events. This was huge. These players were giving up their PGA Tour cards, which, if you know anything about professional golf, is like giving up your lifeline. The PGA Tour has been the pinnacle of professional golf for decades. It's where legends are made, where major championships are earned, where golf history happens. Tiger Woods, who turned down what was reportedly close to $1 billion from LIV, said something that really stuck with me. He basically said that these players were turning their backs on the tour that made them who they are. The tour that gave them the platform to become household names in the first place. But then the PGA Tour did something they probably should have done years earlier. They started throwing around their own big money. Prize pools got bigger, bonus programs got created, and suddenly the PGA Tour was competing in a way they never had to before. It's like they woke up and realized, oh wait, we actually have competition now. So who actually made the jump? Well, the list might surprise you. We're not just talking about players who were struggling or looking for one last payday. Some of these guys were in their prime. Phil Mickelson was probably the biggest shock early on. I mean, this is a guy who's won 6 major championships, who's been the face of American golf for years. When he joined LIV, it sent shockwaves through the entire golf world. People couldn't believe it. Then you had Dustin Johnson, who was the #2 player in the world at the time. This wasn't some guy who was past his prime. This was someone who was still competing at the highest level and winning tournaments. Brooks Koepka, another major champion, followed shortly after. And it wasn't just American players. You had guys like Sergio Garcia from Spain, who had been on the PGA Tour for over 2 decades, Charles Schwartzel from South Africa. Players from all over the world were making this move. But here's what really got people talking. A lot of these players said it wasn't just about the money. They talked about the schedule being less demanding, about being able to spend more time with their families, about the team format being more fun. Dustin Johnson said something like, "The money was nice, but what really attracted me was the different format and the opportunity to be part of something new." Now, whether you believe that or not is up to you, but when someone's offering you $100+ million, I imagine it makes a lot of things seem more appealing, if you know what I mean. But this isn't just a story about money and golf tournaments. There's a much bigger conversation happening here, and it gets pretty heavy pretty fast. LIV Golf is funded by Saudi Arabia, and that's where things get complicated. Saudi Arabia has a pretty controversial track record when it comes to human rights. The murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018 was a huge international incident that put Saudi Arabia under intense scrutiny. So when Saudi money started flowing into professional golf, people had questions, big questions. Some families of 9/11 victims spoke out against LIV Golf and the players who joined, saying they were taking blood money. That's a direct quote, and it's as serious as it sounds. These families felt like the players were helping Saudi Arabia improve its image on the world stage, while ignoring the very real human rights concerns. The players who joined LIV had different responses to this criticism.
And I believe that LIV Golf is going to do a lot of good for the game as well.
Some said they were just playing golf and didn't want to get into politics. Others said they believed sports could be a force for positive change. But the criticism was intense and it wasn't going away. Phil Mickelson got in particular trouble for some comments he made early on, where he basically admitted that Saudi Arabia had a terrible human rights record, but said he was willing to work with them anyway because it gave players leverage against the PGA Tour. Those comments really didn't go over well, and Mickelson ended up taking a break from golf for several months. So how did golf fans react to all this? Well, it's been mixed, to put it mildly. Some fans were angry, feeling like their favorite players had sold out. There were protests at early LIV events, and some players got booed pretty heavily. But then something interesting happened. People started actually watching LIV Golf. The different format, the team element, the louder music and more casual atmosphere. Some fans actually liked it. It felt less stuffy than traditional golf, more accessible somehow. The TV ratings were okay, not amazing. What was really interesting was the younger demographic seemed more open to it. Maybe it's because they didn't have the same emotional attachment to the PGA Tour, or maybe they just liked the change of pace. And here's something that might surprise you. Some of the LIV events have had pretty good attendance. People were curious, and curiosity drove ticket sales. Plus, when you've got some of the biggest names in golf playing, people want to see them play, regardless of what tour they're on. But the golf traditionalists, they were not having it. These are people who love the history and tradition of the game, and to them, LIV Golf felt like it was trying to turn golf into something it wasn't supposed to be. The criticism from this group was intense and hasn't really let up. So where are we now? Well, it's been a couple of years since LIV Golf launched, and the dust is starting to settle, sort of. The initial shock has worn off, and people are getting used to this new reality, where professional golf is basically split into two different worlds. LIV Golf has established itself as a legitimate tour. They've got their regular events, their team championships, and they've figured out their TV coverage. The players who joined seem pretty happy with their decision, at least publicly. They're making good money, playing a different format, and they seem to be enjoying themselves. The PGA Tour, meanwhile, has made some major changes. They've increased prize money significantly, created new bonus programs, and they're working on making the tour more appealing to players. It's like they finally realized they had to compete for their own players, which is something they never really had to do before. But there's still this weird tension in professional golf. These players who left for LIV can't compete in major championships that are associated with the PGA Tour. They can't play in the President's Cup or the Ryder Cup. It's like they're living in this parallel golf universe. If you step back and look at the bigger picture, what LIV Golf has done is pretty remarkable, regardless of how you feel about it. They came into a sport that had been run the same way for decades and said, what if we did this completely differently? And they had the money to actually try it. That's the key thing here. They weren't just talking about change, they had the resources to make it happen. They could offer players life-changing money, they could create new tournaments, they could basically build a tour from scratch. It's made everyone in professional golf think differently about how things work. The PGA Tour had to adapt and change in ways they probably never thought they'd have to. Players now have options they never had before. And fans are seeing different formats and approaches to professional golf. Whether this is good or bad for the sport overall is still being debated. Some people think competition is always good and that this will ultimately make professional golf better. Others think it's divided the sport in a way that's going to be hard to heal from. But you can't deny that it's been fascinating to watch. It's like someone threw a huge rock into a pond that had been calm for decades, and we're still watching the ripples spread out. So, to wrap this up, why did these players leave the PGA Tour for LIV Golf? Well, the simple answer is money. The guaranteed signing bonuses were just too good to pass up. But the real answer is probably more complicated than that. It was about money, yes, but it was also about opportunity. The opportunity to be part of something new, to try a different format, to have more control over their schedules. Some of these players had been on the PGA Tour for 20 plus years. Maybe they were just ready for a change. And let's be honest, when someone offers you generational wealth to play the sport you love, that's a pretty compelling offer. These players have families, they have futures to think about, and LIV Golf offered them financial security that the PGA Tour simply couldn't match. The controversy around Saudi Arabia's involvement is real, and it's serious. People have legitimate concerns about sports washing and human rights, and those concerns aren't going away. But for the players who made the move, they clearly decided that the benefits outweighed those concerns, at least for them personally. What happens next? Honestly, nobody knows for sure. Maybe the two tours will eventually find a way to coexist or even merge somehow. Maybe they'll stay separate forever. Maybe something else entirely will happen that we're not even thinking about right now. But one thing's for certain, professional golf is never going to be the same. LIV Golf changed everything, whether you love it or hate it. And that's probably the most important thing to understand about this whole story. Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments what you think about all this. Are the players right to take the money? Is LIV Golf good for the sport? I'd love to hear your thoughts.